Bonjour. Tout d'abord, je prends acte de la décision prise par la Banque du Canada ce matin. La Banque du Canada mène une politique monétaire indépendante du gouvernement et nous respectons cette indépendance. La tradition pionnière du Canada en matière d'indépendance des banques centrales est respectée dans le monde entier et la solidité et l'indépendance de nos institutions, y compris la Banque du Canada, sont l'un des éléments fondamentaux qui font du Canada un pays sûr et fiable pour les entreprises. Second, I want to underscore for Canadians why they should be confident in the strength and resilience of the Canadian economy. Canada saw the strongest economic growth in the G7 in 2022, and in the first quarter of this year, our economy grew by 3.1%, the strongest in the G7. Just this morning, the OECD predicted that the Canadian economy will see the fastest rate of growth on average in the G7 for 2023 and 2024. In April, after we tabled the budget, S&P reiterated Canada's AAA credit rating, and Canada has both the lowest deficit to GDP and the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7, lower than our two other G7 AAA rated peers, the US and Germany, and also lower than some other major AAA rated economies like the Netherlands. Most important of all, there are 900,000 more Canadians working today than there were working before COVID first hit. In the first 4 months of 2023, the Canadian economy added nearly 250,000 jobs. We have now recovered 129% of the jobs that were lost in the first months of the pandemic, compared to just 115% in the United States. And at 5%, Canada's unemployment rate remains near its historic low. That really matters in the lives of Canadians across the country. La récession de 2008 était beaucoup moins profonde que celle du COVID, mais elle a marqué une génération de jeunes. Nous étions déterminés à ce que cela ne se reproduise pas. Et grâce à l'attention soutenue que nous avons portée à l'emploi pendant la pandémie, nous y parvenons. Après la crise financière de 2008, il a fallu plus de 9 ans pour que le taux de chômage du Canada retrouve son niveau d'avant la crise. 9 ans. Après le pic dévastateur du COVID, il n'y en a fallu que 2. The Canadian economy is strong and resilient, and more Canadians have good jobs today than ever before. A strong and resilient economy with plentiful job opportunities is good for Canadian workers, and it is good for families across our country. Inflation has fallen from its peak of 8.1% last June to 4.4% in April. That is lower than the UK at 8.7%, lower than Germany at 7.2%, and lower than inflation in Australia, Norway, France, Denmark, the Netherlands, the United States, and the EU overall. The Bank of Canada has predicted that inflation will fall to 3% this summer. We're not there yet, but we have made some real meaningful progress, which is being felt in people's lives. Getting through COVID was really hard. Getting through the deep recession caused by COVID was really hard. And today, getting through the global inflation caused by COVID and Putin's invasion continues to be hard. But there is no country in the world that is navigating these challenges more effectively than Canada, and there is no country in the world better positioned for a soft landing than Canada. We are very close to the end of this difficult time and to a return to low, stable inflation and strong, steady growth. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Nombreux Canadiens qui sont inquiets aujourd'hui de voir leur paiement hypothécaire monter et qui se demandent si le gouvernement fédéral ne peut pas faire quelque chose pour les aider.
C'est une question très importante et c'est une question, un enjeu qui m'inquiète beaucoup. Je comprends que aujourd'hui, la bonne chose, la puissance dans l'économie canadienne, c'est le marché du travail. La chose que nous avons, c'est qu'il y a beaucoup d'emplois et les gens qui veulent travailler peuvent travailler. Et pour moi, c'est la pierre angulaire de notre politique économique et de l'économie canadienne. Parce que je sais que pour chacun et chacune, avoir un travail, c'est le clé d'avoir une bonne vie. Mais vous avez posé une très importante question parce qu'il y a toujours deux enjeux qui créent des vraies difficultés pour les Canadiens. D'un côté, l'inflation, d'autre côté, les taux d'intérêt élevés. Je suis absolument confiante et les Canadiens et Canadiennes doivent être confiantes que l'inflation est en train de diminuer et qu'on va arriver à un niveau de l'inflation stable et normal. C'est le devoir du Banque du Canada et on doit tous avoir la confiance que la Banque du Canada va faire son travail. Mais je suis d'accord avec vous que l'utile que la Banque du Canada a, c'est les taux d'intérêt. Et les taux d'intérêt élevés créent vraiment les difficultés pour les Canadiens, pour les familles canadiennes. On doit savoir, on doit comprendre que on approche le fin de cette période difficile. Avec chaque mois, on est plus proche à la fin. Et concernant votre question, vraiment, la chose importante pour le gouvernement, en ce qui concerne la fiscalité, c'est de prendre une approche équilibrée. Et c'est ce qu'on a fait cette année, dans le budget de cette année, l'année passée. D'un côté, on comprend qu'on doit prendre une approche compatissante, on doit aider les plus vulnérables. On est là, on sera là. Le rabais pour l'épicerie va arriver aux ménages canadiens, aux familles canadiennes le 5 juillet. C'est important et c'est la bonne chose à faire. D'autre côté, on doit aussi prendre une approche responsable du côté fiscal pour ne pas mettre de l'huile sur le feu d'inflation. Et c'est ce qu'on fait aussi.
English Minister, on mortgages, this is hitting people, the middle class and those working hard to join it are getting hit the hardest by this because their mortgage prices are going up. Older people, more established, not so much an issue for them if they paid off their homes. What's your message to the people who now are questioning whether or not they can continue to afford their houses or enter the market at all?
Look, I think that is an extremely important question, and there are a lot of Canadians who are anxious right now and who will be concerned when they see this step taken by the Bank of Canada. That is entirely understandable, and I absolutely understand that anxiety and that concern. I do want to point to, from my perspective, the core strength and the resilience of the Canadian economy, and that is the extremely important jobs market. The fact that we have 900,000 more jobs than we had before COVID first hit is so important. And that, having a job, having a good job, is the key to the well-being of every single Canadian and their family. It's the key to being able to pay your rent or your mortgage, and that is a strength which we have and Canadians can count on. But I absolutely understand the concerns Canadians have with mortgages today, and I understand the concerns Canadians have with inflation. And what I really think is important also for us to bear in mind is we are coming to the end of this difficult path out of the COVID economy. We are seeing inflation coming down. It hit a peak of 8.1, down to 4.4, and the Bank of Canada today reiterated the prediction that it gets down to 3% in the summer. That is a very big deal, very, very important for Canadians. And I do think it's important for us to all bear in mind the destination, right? The destination is stable, low inflation, and steady, strong growth. And that is where, that is the direction that we are heading. The path is very, very clear, and Canada is moving more effectively along that path than any other country I can name in the world.
Il y a quand même beaucoup de Canadiens qui ont de très bons emplois et qui n'y arrivent pas. De leur dire ça va finir bientôt, ça ne les aide pas à court terme. Puis il y a des gens qui n'ont pas accès au rabais pour l'épicerie, qui n'auront pas accès au crédit dont vous parlez. On fait quoi pour ces gens-là?
C'est la question peut-être la plus importante et la plus difficile. Et vous avez raison que c'est un moment très difficile pour les Canadiens. C'est très difficile pour les Canadiens de la classe moyenne. Je veux rassurer les Canadiens avec deux faits importants. La première chose que je dois souligner, c'est que avoir un travail et avoir un marché d'emploi fort, c'est la chose la plus importante pour chacun et chacune, et c'est la chose qui nous aide le plus. Et on a arrivé depuis la récession du COVID à un marché du travail historiquement fort. C'est une bonne chose. La deuxième chose, c'est que oui, on est dans une période difficile et le taux d'inflation élevé, c'était vraiment difficile. La bonne chose, c'est que l'inflation, qui est arrivée à 8,1%, maintenant est 4,4%. Et la bonne nouvelle aujourd'hui du Banque du Canada, c'est que le banque a réitéré que l'inflation, du point de vue du banque, sera à 3% cet été. Une bonne nouvelle. Oui, pour le moment, l'outil que la banque utilise pour arriver à ce niveau d'inflation crée des vraies difficultés des Canadiens. C'est la réalité, mais on est plus proche que jamais à la fin de cette période extraordinairement difficile du côté économique.
Yes, sir. Can I ask about Trans Mountain? Can you look ahead to when the Government of Canada divests and say whether you expect the government will take a loss or realize a profit on that divestment?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As you may have seen, there was some interesting research from from BMO and from Scotiabank this week out about TMX. We are nearing the completion of this project, which is very important for Canada's economic sovereignty. What we're seeing already is the closer we get to completion, the less of a penalty Canada is paying in terms of price for not controlling our own natural resources. So the project is already delivering economic benefit, and when it is complete, it will give us real economic sovereignty and a real economic benefit. We have been very clear that the government does not intend to be the long-term owner of the asset, that there will be a divestment process. We are very focused on Indigenous participation. I think that is fair and just. And what we saw from the market analysts this week is that there is real market interest in this rare and valuable piece of infrastructure.
Isn't this a shot across the back? Isn't this rate hike up?
Has he given concerns to you about government spending in recent meetings with him at all?
I talk to the governor often, and we understand that we each have our own lane. The governor is independent, and he has a clear objective, which he and his team independently pursue. I respect that very much. I also really believe that having clear lines of communication is valuable, and we had the governor speak at the request of provincial and territorial finance ministers. The governor was kind enough to join me and the provincial and territorial finance ministers at our joint meeting earlier this year. So those lines of communication are valuable. It's good for fiscal and monetary policy to know what each side is doing. One point that I would emphasize from the bank's statement today, which I think is important, well, 2 points really. One is the bank emphasized in its statement the extent to which inflation is a global phenomenon, and that central banks around the world are grappling with it together using the same tool. And in fact, the Federal Reserve, the interest rate set by the Federal Reserve is higher than the interest rate in Canada today. The bank also underscored the extent to which higher labor force participation rates in Canada and Canadian immigration are increasing labor supply, which is very helpful when it comes to restoring stability in the economy. And then just finally, in terms of Canada's fiscal policy, I think the important markers are, one, we have the lowest deficit in the G7, full stop. We have, in fact, the lowest deficit not only relative to our AAA-rated G7 peers like Germany, like the US, but we have a lower deficit than other significant AAA-rated economies like the Netherlands. And Canada's AAA rating was reiterated by S&P, which is a nonpartisan, objective judge of our fiscal policy. Our AAA rating was reaffirmed after we tabled the budget. So we are confident that we are on the right path. And I'll just conclude by saying I really recognize that this is a getting back to low, stable inflation and strong, steady growth after the incredible challenges that the pandemic and Putin's invasion imposed on the global economy and on Canada. It's really hard, and it is imposing real pain on a lot of Canadians and Canadian families. Absolutely understand that, and our view is we want to get to the end of this road as quickly as possible while supporting the most vulnerable. Thank you very much.
One more housing affordability. Just one more housing affordability. It only took